So yes, thank you all for coming. So appreciate you joining us on this week of Thanksgiving. So it's great to see everybody here. So at the moment, I am in the office, so I apologize if there's any background noise. And Sarah is on the road, so but being the trooper she is, she's with us, and we have Mindy with us today. So we're a full house too. So let's just get started. So hi, my name is Carol White Evans. I'm the Chemicals and the Environment Agent here at the Extension Office in Sarasota. I'm joined by Sarah, who's on the road, and as well as Mindy, who I think is at home, but I'm so glad to have her with us. Also wanted to mention that our communications guru, Kevin, who does an amazing job of getting these videos loaded to our website. He's currently on vacation, but we'll be back soon. And we also have a weekly blog for this series that we've started. Probably not going to get one out this week just because of the holidays, but be looking out on our blog. We have 3 out at this point, so just be looking on our website for those blogs that follow these programs. So again, I want to say thank you for joining our edible gardening series. We offer it every Monday from 12 to 12:30ish. This week's topic is on pesticides, so conventional and biorational pesticides. I'll spend a little over 10 minutes. I try to keep it to 10, but it's not going to happen. But like always, if you want to go ahead and put your question in the chat box as we're going along, and Mindy and Sarah will monitor that chat box. Probably more Mindy this week, and we'll get to those at the end of the program. So with that, this is our 7th session in our series, and we'll be going through December, and then we'll start a new session in January with new topics. So this webinar series came out of hearing over and over again from county residents that they're frustrated with trying to get their garden started in Florida. So these are people who are actually starting new gardens, who've been trying to garden for a while, or people who've moved from another state. So gardening in Florida definitely can be very difficult and frustrating, but their rewards are amazing. So keep at it, and through this series, hopefully you learn a few new things to help you along. So being extension, when we hear all these things, about their frustrations, we want to help. So that's how this series actually came about. So to start with this, so today we'll be talking about pesticides, so both conventional and biorational pesticides. For many people, they have no idea there's a difference between the two. They kind of think, well, pesticide is a pesticide, right? Well, the answer to that is no. There's a huge difference between the two. So we have come a long way in the last 50 years with new chemistries, but there's still a long way to go. So we have become much more aware of the negative consequences to indiscriminate uses of pesticides, and realize that we need to be aware of our inputs to the environment, and those to reduce those negative impacts that those have on our ecosystem and ultimately our health and our safety. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So the world of pesticides. So pesticides are basically substances used to kill or prevent, destroy, repel, or even attract something we deem a pest. So pesticides ultimately are used to kill the pest. So when we say pesticide, that is like an umbrella word that encompasses all these different products that we use against specific organisms. So for instance, we have insecticides, which are used to kill insects. Herbicides are used to kill things like grasses or weeds or even plants. Rodenticides are used against rodents. Miticides are used against mites, so you kind of get the idea. We know that pesticides have been around for about 4,500 years, when the Sumerians used sulfur compounds on their crops for insects and mite control. And they've been used throughout the centuries, and we continue to use them. So we're just becoming more aware of their effects, so both the positive and the negative. But knowing is better than not knowing of what they can do. So we have when you think about pesticides, they kind of have buckets of pesticides. So there are 2 main categories. So that's conventional and biorationals. When we talk about conventional pesticides in today's environment, we're talking mainly about products that have an active ingredients that are produced synthetically. So there are some exceptions to this, but most of these products are synthetic pesticides of today. The older chemistries that have been used for generations and they continue to be used are products such as like arsenic and mercury, lead, nicotine sulfates. Most of those were inorganics. And then there's that oldest product that was used in ancient time and continues to still be used and is very effective is sulfur. So our older conventional chemicals were generally like broad spectrum. So they targeted anything and everything. And they had this real long residual activity in the environment. So their safety to us ranged from fairly low toxic to highly toxic. So conventional chemicals are also historically led to insect resistance and bioaccumulation. So not the best things around. So synthetic pesticides came about around the 1940s or 1950s. The first ones that led to the synthetic pesticide era was DDT. So in 1940s, we had the organochlorines, which are the DDTs. The 50s, we had the organophosphates, which you might hear of as OPs. And those are things like Dursban, diazinon, malathion. So some of these acephate. So some of these we still are using quite often. And then the 1950s, we had carbamates, which are carbaryl, methylcarb, and oxamil, which again, some of those are still being used. The pyrethroids, which are now quite popular, have been used since about the 1990s. They had a real rapid expansion and a much more complex chemistry in the 90s to those other synthetic chemistries, and they continue to improve those. Follow those synthetics, which we started seeing a lot of things like insect resistance. They started coming up with these newer chemistries. So they were newer or softer chemistries. That's because we started seeing those issues that surrounded these synthetic pesticides. They were target specific. They're less toxic. They're better for the environment. And many of these are considered reduced risk pesticides, which I'll talk about next. Now, from all that, we learned that with previous pesticide use, it was evident that we could use substances that were as a whole all around better, but still effective when using them correctly or as part of an integrated pest management system. And so that's where biorational pesticides came along. So you're also going to hear them called like alternative pesticides or biopesticides, but those three words all mean the same thing. So biorationals is a term used to describe a broad range of low environmental impact substances or products that are typically derived from natural products. So many are registered on the Omni Review list, so that Organic Materials Registry Institute. So keep in mind that those are fairly equivalent. A lot of those are found on there. But keep in mind that when things are labeled organic or natural, organic does not always mean it's chemical or pesticide free, nor does organic or natural mean that it's risk free. So keep in mind of those two things. So words matter. So when we're talking about minimal risk pesticides and reduced risk pesticides, minimal risk pesticides are pesticides that are exempt from EPA registration. And so they're determined to pose a minimum risk to humans or the environment. Their active ingredients still have to be listed in the EPA, but basically a lot of these are the essential oils. So just know when you're looking at a minimum risk pesticide, that's something that has it's been tested for its safety on us, but has not been tested for its effectiveness. So you just got to use those knowing that those are the limitations of that. And then there's the reduced risk. EPA reduced risk pesticides. These are among the most advanced form of conventional chemicals. So they're still conventional chemicals, but they're advanced in the form of their target selectivity and their safety. The 5 primary traits of reduced risks are that they're reduced risk to humans' environmental health. They have a lower risk and toxicity to non-target organisms, which is great. Lower risk to ground and surface water pollution, which is something we also strive for. And also they have low use rates. So you only have to use a small amount of those pesticides in order for it to be effective. And the last thing is that they're compatible with an IPM program. We don't see that compatibility with most conventional chemicals, but a lot of the reduced risk pesticides, if you're going to be using, are going to be labeled, and they're going to be labeled as an alternative to organophosphates or carbamates. So if you ever have to use conventional chemical, look for these reduced risk pesticides. So when we're talking about alternative pesticides, so our biorational pesticides or our biopesticides, there are four main groups. So we have our botanicals, which are commonly derived from plants or flowers. These could include real common things like neem oils and pyrethrum or pyrethrins. We have our soaps and oils, and these include our insecticidal soaps, horticulture oils, as well as our essential oils. Then we have the minerals, which are like diatomaceous earth, which is also called DE, easier to say, our kaolin, clay, and also sulfur. Kaolin's an awesome thing, but it's really difficult to use. I'll put that out there. And then microbials. So these are our things that are living. So these are our fungi, our bacteria, and our nematodes. Now it's not a fifth category, but it's part, they get used in a IPM program, and those are insect growth regulators. These are in that reduced risk category, and that's why they can be used within an IPM program. IGRs are great. I'll talk about them a little bit later, but they are a fabulous use of a product, and they only target specific life stages. So IGRs are, we use a lot of IGRs in if you have a dog or a cat, we use IGRs in flea medicines and tick medicines. So they are really a good product. So now getting to biorational. So the benefits of biorational. So they do have fast breakdown. So they really break down and degrade rapidly in sunlight, in air, and moisture. The result of that is that there's little to no residual or product that remains and persists in the environment. So those are things we want. There reduces that risk to non-target organisms, which is good, but also you have to remember though that precise timing. It's important to apply these sprays, and this is as a general for most of these, applying them early in the morning or later in the evening, as well as to making sure you're targeting the correct insect stage is really important. Also, you might have to use these more frequently to get the insect under control that you're trying to target, because they don't have that residual, right? Once they dry, there's no residual to them, and then they break down. That's a good thing, but it also means that you're going to have to apply them probably more often if you have a larger infestation. So they're also fast acting. So some natural products like soaps and oils kill insects on contact, and others like BT, Bacillus thuringiensis, and spinosad can either have to be ingested. Spinosad actually can be a contact or an ingestion. But what it does, it causes those insects to quickly stop feeding. And although they may not die instantly, they'll, it takes them maybe sometimes 2 to 3 days to die. But once they stop feeding, they've stopped doing the damage. So that's a good thing. And then also that low toxicity. So they have low to moderate mammalian toxicity, which is great for us. But again, these products, they are slow pesticide. They're used to kill. So use them with caution when you're using them. Always follow and read the manufacturer's label and instructions, and always wear whatever PPE it tells you to use on the label. You need to make sure you're aware and use that. So now on to some of the things that you have to be careful about when using biopesticides. So these are some of the disadvantages. So phytotoxicity, biggest thing. So plants can be damaged by insecticidal soaps, especially, and oils, especially oils, and sulfurs. When you're applying these at high rates, or if you're applying them more often, right? When we talk about having to use them over a couple times. So be careful with that. Also can be more stressed, more prevalent in stressed plants. So be careful with plants that it's either really hot out, or they're really sunny, or you've had some problems with the irrigation. So anytime a plant is stressed and you add an oil to it, it's going to be disastrous. So also they tend to be a little bit more expensive than conventional chemicals, but in the long run, that's worth that input of cost. And then also the learning curve, right? Because timing is really important with these things because of the fact they don't have that residual. You have to be really, really cautious of that learning curve is a little bit higher than normal. So first thing is our botanicals. So these are our pyrethrins or our pyrethrum, as well as our names. So these are derived from usually from plants. So pyrethrin. It's fabulous products. It's from the chrysanthemum plant. Um, they're a poison that affects the nervous system of the insect, and they cause this rapid knockdown and quick death. So that rapid knockdown is great. You spray it, man, and they go down. But problem is sometimes those insects do recover. So just be aware of that. But they are quick acting with a low toxicity to animals, and they degrade within a day. So again, they have no residual spray. They're effective against a wide variety of insects, especially soft-bodied and chewing, sucking insects, such as like aphids and leafhoppers, mealybugs, spider mites, scale, thrip, and whiteflies. So this pyrethrin's a great product. Some negatives that are there is that because they work against a lot of insects, it kind of makes them a little bit broad spectrum. So be careful and cautious of what you're spraying, and try to anytime you spray anything, make sure you're only trying to spot spray. You don't want to do this broad coverage type sprays. And then neems, this is from the seed of the neem tree. It's from the actual fruit, and it contains these neem oils, but also contains azadirachtin. I'm not going to talk about azadirachtin. It's actually it's a great product, but it's actually considered a conventional pesticide. But with neem, when you apply it, it's sprayed onto the plant leaves. It acts like soaps and oils. It also has some effectiveness against foliar plant diseases. It's most effective on immature insects and species that undergo complete metamorphosis. So we won't talk about that, but just think small, soft-bodied insects are really good. So soaps and oils. Most effective against small, soft-bodied insects and mites that are immobile and slow-moving. So both soaps and oils work against these things. You have to get complete coverage when you're using these oils. There's no residual activity like most of it, so you have to apply more often. And they basically block the insects from breathing, so they can either suffocate them. The oils, so horticultural oils, can prevent gas exchange through egg membranes, which is great. And then many of these also have anti-feeding repellencies. So that's, basically it's just going to stop it from feeding in the first place. And then the mineral oils actually do help with virus transmission. So that's a really good thing as well. I love soaps and oils. If you call me, I'll probably tell you to use soaps and oils. So not very, very low toxicity to us. So they're not harmful to us. But again, when you spray them, you got to be careful that you're not targeting beneficials, because they can, once they get on something, and if you cover it, it's going to die. So our minerals, so DE and sulfurs. So DE is mainly used for indoor. It's a great product. It basically is a silica. It's the skeleton of diatom, so it's a silicate type product, and it gets on them, it cuts their exoskeleton, and it basically desiccates them. But you can use those against ants, aphids, bed bugs, crickets, fleas, millipedes, sow bugs, and slugs. Again, hard to use outdoors because once it gets wet, it's not effective. So so that's why it's better used for indoors. Sulfurs are awesome. They work two ways. So they can use them for against funguses on your plants, but as well as insects. But the insect either has to eat it or come in contact with it. So it controls things like mites and psyllids and thrips. But it can damage plants when it's hot outside. So hot, dry weather, do not use sulfurs on your plants. Also, it has a lot of incompatibilities with other pesticides. So always read your label to make sure that you're not going to do some damage that you weren't aware of. There are other things like silica gels and borax or boric acid and kaolin sprays. I'm not going to talk about those because they're not as well. They're not used as much. And again, we only have a few more minutes. So and then our microbials. So I love microbials too. These are like Bt and spinosad. So these are living bacteria that are target to specific insects and specific life stages. So they're more to like 80 different types or subspecies of Bt. Incredibly effective and actually really reasonably priced for a biological. really low risk to beneficial insects, which is also great. They're basically a stomach poison. So with a BT, the insect actually has to eat it. So you spray it on your plant. So we're talking about like caterpillars. Spray it on your plant. The caterpillar eats it. It ingests it, right? And then that bacteria then propagates in its stomach and kills the insect from releasing toxins in its stomach. Again, they're very host specific. They won't harm people or pets or birds or bees. They are slow acting, so don't expect that insect to fall down and die the minute that you apply it. So just know it's going to stop them feeding though. So that's a good thing. And they do break down quickly. Spinosids are another bacteria, really quite a bit wider profile than the other microbials. It attacks the nervous system, and it's both a contact and an ingestion. So that's the good thing about spinosid, is that it works two different ways. It's better than other microbials in that it has a broader spectrum of activity, and it's also good at controlling thrips. So that's a good one to remember. It stops insects from feeding fairly quickly after they ingest it or it comes in contact. And again, you've stopped the feeding. Um, Also good tox screen, so it doesn't have high toxicity to non-target organisms or to us, which is fabulous. The one thing about spinosad though, be careful. It is highly toxic to bees when it's wet. So if you're out spraying your garden, make sure you're doing it really early, or if you're doing it later in the afternoon. Do not come in contact with that bee. Once it dries, though, it's no longer going to be harmful to the bees. But just be aware of that issue with bees. And then we have other microbials, so like our parasitic fungi. So these are soil-borne entomopathic fungus. They attack and kill a huge variety of immature and adult insects like aphids, bark bees, chinch bugs, moths, cutworms, corn borers. So, I mean, there's like a long list of things that they attack. And you do the same thing. You spray it on. You buy it in a jar and you spray it on like you would any other pesticide. Um, they're non-toxic to human or animals, except they are quite toxic to fish. So be careful when you're around water bodies. And some will target beneficial insects. So just again, read your label when you're using those. And then our beneficial nematodes. We talked about about nematodes last week, so I'm not going to spend too much time. But again, they're microscopic worm-like parasites. They're unsegmented roundworms actually, and they live in the soil. And they can affect both plants and animals. But when they're the beneficials, they're only going to eat other nematodes. Using nematodes is really good, especially in areas that have had, if you've had problems with insect resistance, like something else is not helping you and that insect has built up a resistance against a pesticide you're using. That's when nematodes are really good, because it's basically they're just feeding on other nematodes. So it's a good thing. And then our IGRs. So IGRs, they basically, what they do is they interfere with the molting process of immature insects. So IGRs are really not going to help you if you have adult insects, but when you're attacking immature insects and the eggs, that's the best time. And again, they're reduced risk pesticides, so they are a true conventional chemical, but they're a reduced risk chemical, and you can use them in an IPM program. They're fabulous. I can't say enough about, if I'm going to use a pesticide, I know these are a really good thing to use. Some of the things that they attack are fungus gnats, leaf miners, scale, shore flies, and white flies. So they are a fabulous product. So with that, this is our list. I'm actually going to also add, I have another one on reduced risk pesticides I want to put on here. I forgot to put it on. And I know I went over 10 minutes and I apologize, but I appreciate you joining us today. You all have a great rest of your week, a happy Thanksgiving, and a safe Thanksgiving.